I got another question, which is, can a person ever heal from the primal wound of adoption? So if this were therapy, which it is not, it is a YouTube video, but what I would say to the client, if they asked me that question, if a client said to me, hey, can you ever heal from the primal wound of adoption? My first phase of the response would be, I don't know, because I've never been adopted. So I've never had to personally heal, it's not something I can talk about. I've healed other things in my own life. I wasn't adopted, so I don't know if or it can be healed or whatever. The second thing I would do is I would challenge an assumption that is there in the question, which is that adoption is a primal wound. I would ask the client, and I'm asking you, what is a primal wound? What does that mean to you? We're all using words in certain contexts in certain ways, and it has a meaning to you. It's based on your map of reality. I could project what I think a primal wound is, but it might not mean the same thing. So I need to know what a primal wound means to you, and I need to know why there is a complex equivalence in your mind between primal wounds and adoption. See, from the other side of the fence, where I'm on, I wasn't adopted, but I am considering adopting very seriously. And so the idea that a person who's been adopted would de facto assume that it's a wounding experience kind of bothers me. And my only way to sort of recheck what that is like is, there's no, I could go and read up on it, I could read a book, or I could ask some human beings and say, well, what was it like? Does it feel like a wound? Which part of it felt like a wound? I'm hoping that the primal wound that you're referring to wasn't the adoption process. I'm hoping that the primal wound that you're referring to was the situation that meant that you were available to be adopted. I'm hoping that was the wound, but perhaps you were adopted into an abusive family, and that's why you consider it to be a wounding experience. Again, I don't know. I would have to gather more information. You have to have the humility to say, I don't know. The other final point that I was going to leave this on is just say it actually reminds me of the line in the film from Good Will Hunting where the therapist is saying to the young genius, stop thinking that you know everything about the world just because you read about it in a book. At a cultural level, we live in times where we tend to think that we know everything. I'm talking to people all the time, and they talk to me like they know everything. Like, I'll talk to a guy and he'll say, oh, I know boxing. And I'll say, oh, you know boxing? Oh, right, okay, so how long were you boxing for? Oh, no, I never boxed, but I know boxing. I'm like, so are you telling me that what you mean is you can identify when two people are engaging in the sport of boxing? Yeah, that's what I mean. That's not knowing how to box. That you don't know what the smell of a fucking sweaty glove is like. You don't know what it's like to get hit in the nose. You don't know what it's like to get hit in the head. You don't know how it sounds when you take concussive impact on your jaw. There is no sound. It's a made-up sound that the brain gives it, but there is a sound that you hear when you get like half knocked out, or you get hit in the liver. You don't know boxing, but you think you do because you're observing in a two-dimensional reality. So with the internet and everything, everybody's very, very informed, but they're actually less able to think. And so people are incredibly arrogant nowadays. Like, oh, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be a drug addict. Yeah, I read a book about it. I read Junkie by William S. Burroughs, so I know what it's like to come off heroin. Oh, okay. I know what it's like to be a cocaine addict. I read Filth by Irving Welsh, so I know exactly what it's like to say, okay, all right, you read it in a book. What they say in the film, Good Will Hunting, is he says, stop assuming you know what it's like for me as a Vietnam veteran because you saw some films and you read some books about Vietnam. In the same way, I'll afford you the same respect as I'm affording the respect to you, dear questioner, of saying I don't know what your lived experience was at all of being adopted. I have zero idea what it was like for you to be adopted. And what the character in the film actually says is, because Good Will Hunting is adopted in the film, the client that he's working with, he says it would be like me saying I know what it's like for you to be adopted and what it was like being an orphan because I read Oliver Twist. I fucking don't. I don't know what it was like. You're gonna have to tell me. A book can't tell me what that lived experience was like. So a couple of things there. The first thing is to say I don't know what it was like for you. I am an optimist when it comes to healing any wound. Whatever the primal wound there was in terms of your adoption, we need to get, if this was therapy, I'd say let's get specific about what that was. Anything can be healed given a long enough timeline and the right tools and the right attitude and the right approach, I believe. I'm an optimist in that regard. And the other thing is for me, on the other side of the coin, is say, wow, okay, what is it like to be adopted? Do you end up even if the person who adopts you isn't abusive, do you kind of, in some way, is it possible to resent them maybe because they caused a separation between you and your biological parents? Do you spend the rest of your life wondering, you know, what it would have been like with your biological parents rather than the parents that you got? I mean, I don't know. You would have to tell me what that feels like for you. And I'd be interested to know, especially, as I say, as somebody who's considering adoption, are there pitfalls that can be avoided? Are there assumptions that I need to have or not have? I don't know. You probably be able to inform me more on this situation than I can inform you. Okay, that's enough on that one. Thank you very much for the question, and I'll speak to you soon.